We're in Way Media.
Night, Mr. Walters.
You see that guy over there? Now, he's an actor. The guy on the phone, he's a prize fighter. Me, I'm a cab driver. I'm the only cab driver in this place.
Good evening and welcome to Night, Mr. Walters, a taxi podcast. I'm HP, and with me as always is my co-host, Father Malone. Father Malone, how are you this evening?
I'm great. I'm in the mood for some vaudeville.
Vaudeville you want, vaudeville you'll get. We have a treat for you guys tonight. It's season 2, episode 3, Reverend Jim, A Space Odyssey. It's written by the Charles boys, Glenn Charles and Les Charles, pride of Henderson, Nevada.
Who's better, Glenn or Jim? Or Les? I guess Jim isn't a Charles brother.
Say Jim got my vote. Speaking of Jim, this episode was, of course, directed by James Burrows.
Jim Burrows,
the director in residence. A reminder, we are doing these shows in broadcast order and not in order of filming. We start with some nighttime B-roll of someone bopping their way into Mario's, and we know it's Mario's because James Burrows makes damn sure we know by once again zooming all the way in on the Mario's awning outside. You noticed that, I'm sure.
Not only that, they stuck a checker cab in front.
In the next couple of episodes, we're back to some interesting directorial choices, and I'm here for it. I love it. We cut inside to Mario's, and the cabbies are walking in, and they're ebullient. They're making their way into the restaurant. They're having fun. They're laughing. Alex even announces, "Hey, drinks for everybody." But then he qualifies it in a very poorly dubbed overdub as in our little group.
That was an overdub?
It was.
That? I'm shocked.
Tommy, the bartender, confirms that Tony won his fight, which explains the enthusiasm, why everybody's all happy. Apparently, they went to see Tony fight somewhere. I often wonder, where do you suppose he's fighting? Because he's not big enough to fight at the Garden. So where do you suppose someone like Tony, at his level of skill, where do you think he boxes?
VFW halls, gymnasiums of middle schools, anywhere where they can just throw up a ring. Same places you would find like backyard boxing type, not backyard, but
In the episode with Elaine's son, when Louis takes him to the wrestling match.
Yeah, Louis, they're often like a gymnasium, right?
We learn that Tony won his fight, which is why they're all so happy. And
here's my favorite though. I could not believe a moment went by where they set up something so perfect for Louis, and Louis isn't here, where Jeff Conaway grabs a hold of Bantha's face and he says, "Does this look like the face of a loser?" Like, I expected the phone to ring, and they go, "Guys, it's for you," and he hands it, and it's Louis, and he's and he says something snappy.
It was served right up the middle of the plate. And no one was there to hit the ball out of the park.
We just got a telegram. It's from Louis.
Which is continuing the vaudeville theme, I think.
It wouldn't have been out of place in this episode. It would have been funny.
It would have been really funny. You tend to notice Elaine's sartorial choices in every episode, as I do, of course.
Oh my God,
and
yes.
I don't know if you
going on safari in Loompa Land here.
See, I wrote down, that's a good call, but I wrote down that she's wearing a hat that makes her look like a suffragette. It was very odd.
I went for the safari joke, or conversely, she's part of a new form of gangster, the women's lib mob. It's got kind of a 40s gangster for that fedora, but purple.
It is a bit of a fedora, but fortunately, it's quickly discarded when she sits down to eat at the table.
Say fortunately? No, I want to go on guessing where she was off to later in her.
It was odd.
Her suddenly fashionable Indiana Jones chapeau.
I found it sort of off-putting, so I was happy when it went away. So Tommy comes over with the beers, and the cabbies explain that Tony won the fight because his opponent tripped while climbing over the ropes, and he won by default, which is, let's be honest, that's par for the course with Tony at this point.
Par for the course with the character? Is that what you're saying? This is the most vaudeville stupid joke I've ever heard.
Vaudeville. Tommy, understandably, is slightly incredulous, but Tony counters that, hey, he had to climb over those same ropes, which is, of course, that's something that Tony would say.
Oof, man, they really are doubling down on the Burns. The Burns sinkhole of charisma is gone, but the dumbness remains, and it's all been filtered and sucked up by
It
Bantha
really
here.
does. And Tommy can't help but be chagrined at this because he thought they were coming in and he was the conquering hero who won this fight through pure pugilism. And it turns out the guy just tripped climbing into the ring and knocked himself out. So Tommy, understandably, I think we all agree, demands $3 for the beer. So it's not on the house at all because Tommy is so affronted by this notion. And just then, oh my God, who wanders into Mario's? It's a beacon of hope and light. Who is it, Father Malone?
Oh my God, finally, ladies and gentlemen, we've all been watching Taxi going, where the fuck is Reverend Jim Ignatowski? Here he is, finally, in all his Canadian tuxedoed
So
glory.
happy. Although I will say this as a little bit of a side note, as we'll see. I don't know if you noticed, he's not quite playing him the way that he would eventually start to play him. He's a little more with it and a little more cogent in this episode, I think.
Dare I say, a little more nuanced and a little more thoughtful a performance, a little less of a caricature, a little less of Kramer coming through the door, a little more of, I'm still thinking about who this guy is and what he's been through. He's a little more, connected. That he's definitely, you can see, I wrote down about his performance here, and this is for throughout this entire scene, this scene in particular, is that Christopher Lloyd has a rare ability to let him see you thinking. Like in particular, I only mention it because when Latka starts talking to him, he sort of like recognizes them because he's hearing Latka's gibberish and that triggers it. And Christopher Lloyd can not only let you see him thinking, but he lets you see him realize things. And it's really wonderful. And he's doing it really well here. And I think that's going to go away as Jim becomes more disaffected and more dissociated as the series goes on.
Yeah, it's not quite. I was a little bit surprised. And this harkens back to the Paper Marriage episode where he played him essentially the same way, where he is slightly damaged as a 60s casualty, but he's not, as you said, I think it's a great way to describe it. He's not Kramer bursting through the door, sliding on the floor into Jerry's apartment. He's a little more, as you said, nuanced and kind of clear-headed, I guess. So he comes in, and Bobby, of all people, and one of the things I love about this episode, I keep interrupting myself, is that we're going to see that Bobby is one of the main members of the cabbie group that is really kind of embracing this idea that they're going to befriend Jim and they're going to help him and all this. And I had remembered that from having watched this episode. And I thought that was actually really kind of a charming thing because we haven't seen a ton from Bobby Wheeler. And I like that this is kind of his niche in this episode. I really like that.
I think like Larry David viewing his next door neighbor and filing him away. I think Bobby Wheeler is looking at Reverend Jim Ignatowski and thinking like, someday I'm going to get on a series. I'm going to do this guy. I want this guy around a lot because I want to.
Yeah,
study
he's
him.
he's the actor that's filing these things away for future reference. I think that's a great call. Bobby comes over to say hi to Jim because they recognize him from the wedding. And Jim kind of breezes past the cabbies regardless because he doesn't remember these people. And just at that point, Latka actually enters Mario. So we haven't really dealt with Jim yet. He kind of entered. They have a little bit of a palaver, and then he breezes past so we can get through this. Frankly, I found was the least interesting part of the whole episode, this business with Latka. So Latka comes in, and all the cabbies say to him, well, what happened? We thought you were going to go to the fight with us. And it turns out that he got lost on the subway. Latka got lost on the subway. He ended up in Harlem. And this is another vaudeville bit. He wandered into a bar and there's a little bit of a shtick about how he wandered in looking for a fight.
Latka is going to be, at the time, he would be speaking jive, is how it would be described for the rest of the episode. He spent so much time in Harlem hanging out with everybody there that now he's a brother. And so the hilarity will be peppered throughout the rest of the episode with him saying soul brother type stuff, which admittedly It's admittedly is funny. I want to double
Yeah.
back though, because when Latka walks into the bar, now, first of all, when Jim comes in and Bobby Wheeler recognizes him, he's like, "Hey, that's Reverend Jim," and they're all like, "Hey, Jim, Reverend Jim," right? And then Latka comes in like, "Hey, Latka." The script was written by the Charles brothers, and it starts in this bar. And when everyone comes in, people who know their name call their names out. Just found it interesting.
Interesting. I wonder if we're going to see this pop up again and again.
Maybe in like 3 years. It's really scary how close it is now, actually, because we're in the 80s.
Yeah, that
now.
hadn't occurred to me, but that's actually that's a very good point. You're on fire tonight, Father Malone. So anyway, we get through this business with Lockheed. Like I said, it's funny, but I didn't find it all that interesting. You could have taken that out of the episode and it wouldn't have made any difference, in my opinion. But then we're rescued from this shtick by the reemergence of Jim. He's coming. It's interesting because we never ever see anybody like he does come back into Mario's from effectively stage left, right? He's sort of coming like when we comment on the buffet table all the time, he's coming in from the left of that table, which we've never seen.
Not only never seen, I didn't know there was one. We've never seen anyone go in that direction. I assumed like there was just more dining tables behind us, and then the kitchen and restrooms were in front of us off to the right.
I would have assumed that the kitchen was by the bar like you did. I agree. But Jim says he comes in and he's complaining about how dirty the bathroom is. And then Alex, again, this is vaudeville. Vaudeville. I'm going to wear out the sounder.
God, man, it's a cavalcade of Charles Brothers 1936 cavalcade. Did I say cavalcade enough?
Cavalcade.
Do it again. Cavalcade.
So Alex says to him, well, that's because you were in the kitchen. And Jim says, oh, thank goodness, which I guess is yet another commentary on how crappy the food is at Mario's and how dirty it is.
God, get us out of Mario's. Get us away from... I love the Charles Brothers. You know I love the Charles Brothers, but get us out of here.
Yeah, no, it's... it's fine and it's not going to go away. In fact, spoiler alert, at one point, Jim actually buys Mario's, but we'll get to that when we get to it. Locke is still there and he recognizes Jim as the person who married him back in the paper marriage episode from season 1. And what I thought was interesting about this bit here is that Alex tries jogging Jim's memory by telling him that the paper marriage happened 8 months ago.
Yeah, that was interesting. That like suddenly people on the show are aware of time passage. Not only that, they can tell us exactly when something happened. Whereas before they're just like, fucking hurdy-gurdy nonsense when it comes to a timeline.
Yeah, it was kind of cool, but it makes you think about because that was, I can't remember, I think that was fairly early in the first season. And here we are. I mean, all of those things that we saw happen throughout the first season, that was all within a very compressed 8-month time frame.
It was about halfway through the season, paper
right?
Marriage. I'd say it was about dead way half. Right. So this is 8 months later. It was dead of winter then.
So it's probably like August now. We're thinking.
Yeah, probably
because it's always sunshiny when we see that tracks because it's always sunshiny when we look outside for the B-roll. So that's some verisimilitude for you.
Okay. Well, wait. Okay. Yeah, and then Burns took Elaine's kid to go see Death on the Nile, which was out in January of that year, and that was like the last episode Burns was in. So how long has Burns been?
Well, it's probably 2 or 3 months, I would say, right? At a maximum.
Yeah, it would have to be. It could only be.
So that's interesting. He's only been gone for a short while in Sunshine Cab, time frame. That's interesting.
So this could technically be like June.
And it totally, like I said, it totally makes sense because of the B-roll.
I'll call it summer though, because all the B-roll is shot in golden hour.
Yeah, I did notice that.
Every time they show the cab company, it looks like like Goldfinger.
It's beautiful. Around. Yeah. Cabs have never been shot in such beautifully textured, lighting. It's great. Jim's memory is finally jogged and he remembers having married Latka to the prostitute and that, 8 months ago. And Wheeler then has Tommy bring over another chair and a glass so Jim can join them for beers. And they start to talk a little bit, and Elaine is asking him how you doing and whatever. And apparently the Church of the Peaceful, which is I believe that was the organization that he was representing. He was officiating via that church.
That's where he was ordained.
Thank you.
In order to
That's what I
fulfill
meant to say. So the church isn't doing so great. Jim is not doing so great by extension. He hasn't performed too many marriages or weddings in the interim, and there's not much going on for Jim. So the conversation kind of runs its course, and he thanks them for the beer and he splits. And after he leaves, the cabbies are all talking about Jim, and they all really feel bad for him. Bobby, like I said, in particular, he admits to having a soft spot for Jim. He likes Jim. And he decides to go check on Jim, who now is sitting at the bar. And he asks Jim to come back over to the table. And after some more vaudeville interactions, he agrees. Then Elaine asks Jim if he ever thought of doing something with his life. Jim says he always wanted to be a pharmacist. And Elaine says, well, you need a lot of schooling, a lot of chemistry. Jim says, oh, I've taken a lot of chemistry. Vaudeville.
God, I can't even participate.
So at this point, though, I have another side note here. This is full of side notes. The camera at this point cuts over to this 2-shot of Tony and Latka. And I swear you can see Tony doing everything he can not to laugh. Either he's really acting the part of somebody who's supremely amused by Reverend Jim, or he's genuinely enjoying his performance. And I like to think it's the latter. Like he's chuckling up a storm over there.
Well, we all know Danza hated Andy Kaufman.
Yeah, but he's responding to Reverend Jim's one-liners.
Oh, right. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to stir some shit.
Well, I'm here for that too, because we all know how I feel about Tony. So let's do it.
I don't know that that's true. I know that they had a contentious relationship, but I would never presume to say something like he hated him.
But I think if you watch enough interviews, modern day interviews with Tony Danza, you can see he's being charitable now by saying things like, well, Andy was a very unique performer. And yeah, we had our differences, but I mean, come on, he didn't like the guy.
Probably not. I don't presume to speak for Mr. Tony Danza, although he does seem to have not really liked him at all. And I agree with you, he's being diplomatic.
Yeah, exactly. At that point, Tommy announces last call, and Alex asks for another round.
You think at the time Tony Danza was like, what's he wrestling women for? What kind of a man is he? Do you think he had those thoughts? You think at that time and that level, Tony Danza had no idea what performance art was in the form of Andy Kaufman?
I think that's probably a fair assessment of him. I mean, look, I have fun saying what a lunkhead the guy was. He can't have been that stupid. He's a good actor. He fit in on the show, and everybody got along with him. So I'm not going to, in truth, I can't really bag on the guy. But at the same time, my guess is he was just interested in having fun, doing his thing, scamming on Mary Lou Henner, who we know he had a relationship with around this time. So I just think he probably didn't get it. He didn't get Andy Kaufman and his humor. And he probably just thought he was just some weirdo that was taking the spotlight off of him.
You hear that, Danza? We think you weren't hip. What do you got to say to that? Croon me something.
You know what? You can get a hold of us. You can put a note on the, you leave a review for us. Hey, I'm here. Come at me.
Tony Danza, leave us 5
there you go.
stars.
Call us. We're easy to reach. We don't have agents. Just reach us. You know how to get a hold of us.
We're right here, baby. We ain't going anywhere.
Right.
I'll get in that ring with you, Banta. I'll even get over the ropes.
So Tommy announces last call. Alex motions for another round, and Jim asks them if they'll let him buy the final round, and they're like, yeah, sure. And then there's actually a funny bit. I mean, this thing.
It's a vaudeville bit, but it's fucking physical, and it's fucking Christopher
It's a great
Lloyd.
bit of. I mean, it dates back to the Little Rascals. I mean, let's be honest. It's nothing new or earth-shattering. But anyway, Jim starts rummaging through his pockets, looking to see how much money he has on him, and all he keeps pulling out of his pockets is loose thread, like bundles and
thread. No, it's string. It's like rope. It's like He's basically got the rigging of a ship in his pocket.
But that's all. Sometimes with this kind of joke, like in the Little Rascals, they'll pull out like a rubber ball, a set of jacks, baseball cards, a
frog.
frog, whatever. But in this case, the greatness of the bit in this case is it's like you said, it's nothing but thread and bundled up, it's like thread that's been balled up and sitting in his pocket for days and days and days. That's all he has in his pockets.
So instead of just like a little handful of junk, you have what looks like the inside of a shipwreck hanging off of his hands. And my favorite line, is this currency?
Yeah.
Is any of this currency?
It's great. We'll see throughout this episode, and I've made notes about this, but just for the sake of not repeating myself a million times, it's not an exaggeration to say that pretty much everything that Christopher Lloyd does is getting such a pop from the crowd. They are eating it up. He is so funny, and the laughter is so infectious, and they are just he really is the anti-Burns. It's amazing.
Yeah. Here's the thing. That first season, I felt his absence very early in the rewatch of that. But then I just sort of gave myself over to a Reverend Jim-less taxi and this new guy Burns. So I don't think his presence was, or lack thereof, was felt, but my God, it's so welcome now that he's here.
It's great. I mean, to mix the metaphor a little bit, it's a little like Nigel Tufnell playing with the settings on his amp. When you have Reverend Jim, you're turning the volume up to 11, basically. It was already a good show. It was already a great show. The cast already had chemistry for days. There were laughs. There were great episodes that mixed a lot of different, emotional beats. But now that you have Reverend Jim, or the beginnings of really having him on the show, it's like they kicked it up a notch that you didn't know that it was missing at all.
Look what he did with that vaudeville bit.
It's great. But it's so effortless, the way that Christopher Lloyd does this. And there's something so humble about the way he just schleps himself around and gives himself over to this character, this schlub. But you see the good person, the good-hearted person within every beat of what Jim Ignatowski does. It's really marvelous. And it's so welcome to see this here. It's like a breath of fresh air. Like you said, we had gotten used to the idea that he wasn't on the show, despite knowing that he was going to make an appearance. And now there he is. And it's amazing. Elaine is really pressing the notion that they want to help Jim. But Alex, ever the pragmatist, is pushing back on that idea.
No, not really. He's just setting up another show.
What is kind of refreshing is that he says at one point that it's not like their lives are in such great shape. And you know what? He's right. It's not often that the cabbies admit to themselves that they're kind of in a shit job.
Right, but they can put food on their table, and Reverend Jim cannot. And you know what? He's just as weird and just as fucked up as the rest of them. And this job might actually be a step up for him. So why not give it to him? I was watching the episode the first time, and I wondered, what is the interest here? Why are they doing it? And talking to you just now, that's what I came up with. So Alex needs to shut up.
So it may be the bottom of the barrel for all of them, but to your point, this would be like a huge step up for Jim, because he's got nothing. He's not doing weddings. He's got no money. He's got piles of thread in his pocket that passes for currency.
He's ordained, but what'll that get you? I'm ordained, HP.
You're ordained to perform weddings? Really?
Absolutely. I've performed
through what agency?
Not through any agency. It was an online thing. It's a phony baloney church. But yeah, what do you think? But Father Malone is not an honorary title, my friend.
Do you have like a certificate that?
Yeah, I got it somewhere. It's fine somewhere, but yeah,
I'd love to see that sometime. I did not. We've known each other, ladies and gentlemen, for the better part of 35 years, and I don't think I ever knew that about you. It's amazing. You learn something new every day.
And my point being, it doesn't pay.
No, it doesn't. But Elaine is pushing this and asks Jim straight out, does he feel like does he ever think he's wasting his life And Jim's assertion is that he stands for something, that he's really the living embodiment of the 60s, is what he says. Everything that came along, he did, he says. He did drugs. He spent a year making a macrame couch, he says. And
I want to see that
know.
couch.
Uh,
I don't want to touch it or get on it. But I
just want to
definitely
admire
see
it from a safe distance.
Preferably behind glass.
And he says he went to all the big shows. He went to Woodstock. He also, he says he meditated. He wore flowers in his hair, and he looked for God, who he claims keeps ditching him. And at one point he says, and this is where it gets really, this kind of gets real a little bit.
Wait, but wait, are we going to talk
Yes.
about Tony right now?
I'm getting to that.
Okay, but before you talk about Tony, can I just say something? Because this is the whole problem with that entire hippie movement, right? They all did this. They did all of the mind-expanding, free-loving things that Reverend Jim did, right? The problem is they all thought it was affecting the world when it was really just them freaking out. And I respect a freak out. Go for it. But they thought they were actually doing something. And they weren't. They all ended up at Sunshine Cab. Anyway, let's get a revelation about Tony going. Speaking of them damn
so
hippies.
This is leading up to my second favorite moment in the whole episode. Jim goes on to say that he marched in protest to the Vietnam War, and this, of course, sets off keep on trucking guy, Vietnam vet Tony, who's proud of his service, understandably so. He should be. He points his finger at Jim, and he says,
"He ain't no senator's son."
He points his finger, he jabs it over at Jim, and he says, "You know what? The only reason guys like you could get loaded is because guys like me were doing all your fighting for you. What do you say to that?" And what's Jim's response to that?
Thank you. Which is not only the actual appropriate response, but Jim means it.
Yeah. It's such a perfectly brilliant and a totally appropriate response, and it immediately disarms Tony. This look of shock washes over his face, and the only thing he can say at that point is say, "You're welcome."
Yeah, Banta's reasonable at the end. We've seen him be reasonable before. Like, in his dealings with Wheeler, like he understands their relationship in ways Wheeler cannot. So when you come at somebody and they're open and honest right back to you, like, what are you going to do? You're going to stay mad? Are you going to accept that?
Yeah, I mean, the thing of it is, that Tony was prepared for there to be an argument. Like, he's probably had this argument with other so-called hippies in the past.
Yes, and it's I did this so you could do that, and they said you were in an illegal war and blah, blah, blah. Spitting at me, call me baby killer and all kinds of vile crap. Who are they to protest me, HP? Unless they've been there.
That is a First Blood reference right there. That's
oh my God, First Blood.
From well-known draft dodger, right? Did he dodge the draft? Or he taught school?
He did. Listen, yes, going to Switzerland to teach soccer to girls at a private academy, if that's draft dodging, then yes, he is a draft dodger.
I don't mean to cast aspersions, but I know that he didn't.
Allegedly
he avoided fighting in the war by teaching at a girls' school, and that's whatever.
And then he became the symbol of the new Vietnam, the one where we won.
At this point, though, Jim is really freaking everybody out at the table, and they all at once decide that they've had enough of talking with Jim, and they all make excuses and rush out of Mario's all of a sudden. But before leaving, Elaine says to them again that they should get Jim a job. And Alex, again, is incredulous. He points out that, and this is another vaudeville joke, this brings us to, about 5 or 6?
Oh, my God. Where could we get him? What kind of a loser? Blah, blah, blah.
Basically. Yeah, he says he's got what can he do? Because he's got no training, no skills. So what kind of job could he possibly do? And then all at once, all 4 of them say, cab driver, vaudeville, and we fade out and go to commercial.
What a nice tidy bow, Charles Brothers. Got us to the break.
We groan about all these vaudevillian jokes and these sort of hoary old chestnuts that they keep hammering us with. But I gotta say, in this episode, it works. It just feels like there's a rhythm to the comedy, and these are all that they work so well together, and I didn't mind it.
I'll give you that. You know what? You're right. I think the direction in this episode and the sort of revivification of the show with Christopher Lloyd's injection, it does paper over those vaudeville sort of bulky
Yeah,
moments.
it otherwise would be kind of lumpy with all this bad, outdated humor, but it works here because they're committed to it, and it's just funny. I don't know. There's no other way to say it. It's just funny. So we cut to the garage, and Bobby is walking in with Jim. Bobby evidently is taking Jim out for driving lessons, and by the sounds of it, Jim is got that part licked. He's driving well, and that part of it is already covered.
Hey man, even acid heads can drive a car.
There you go. And Bobby then decides that he has to introduce Jim to Louie, because if Jim's going to get a job there, he has to pass muster with Louie. And Bobby knows that Louie will probably not really, it won't be love at first sight with Reverend Jim. So he's got to finesse the situation. Elaine starts to introduce them, but then Louie just flatly says, "Get him out." Just not even having talked to him. He just sees him coming, twigs on what the situation involves, and he says, "Get him out." And then he goes back. This whole time, he's been giving out cab assignments, and he's insulting everybody that he's giving cabs out to in various ways.
We really need to start recording them as they're. In this shot, it was all about Louis. Basically, we would only see the tops of the heads of the cabbies as they came. But I've noticed in other episodes he's calling out names, and we really need to start writing.
We do. I mean, not every name is as memorable as Ben Goretzky. I'm sure there's, yeah.
I'm pretty sure that Leggy Blonde in Pantsuit was one of those people today, but I can't confirm it because he just saw the top of her.
Yeah, they're very transparent, these extras. They do a good job with that. Alex, Elaine, and Bobby are trying to kind of game plan how to get Louis to agree to accept Jim. And while they're tossing ideas around, and this I found this was hugely disturbing in retrospect. While they're tossing these ideas around,
in retrospect, you were watching it happen.
No.
What is
in of the time, it wasn't a big deal because this was considered a funny thing to do.
Oh, right. Dosing somebody was hilarious.
But now, in retrospect, it's really a violation.
It's a felony, is what it is.
So Elaine, while they're discussing what they're going to do about Louis and Jim, Elaine spies Jim slipping something into Louis's very conspicuous. Now, I noticed this before he did this. I'm like, wow, Louis's mug is front and center in the cage. I wonder.
Yeah, a big L. Now, in fairness, we've seen that mug quite a
We have,
lot.
but it was so conspicuous. We're now on to Chekhov's coffee mug because it's so prominent.
It's instantaneous though. There's no Chekhov involved. It's like, here's the item, there's the
Right.
item. If you see a cup in the first 30 seconds, it'll pay off in those last 30.
So Elaine sees Jim slipping something into this coffee mug, and Alex understandably gets really upset. "Jim, what are you doing?" But and Bobby sidles up to the cage to try and surreptitiously grab the mug, but Louis catches him and has none of it. He waves him away, and he drinks the coffee down, and he continues berating the rest of the cabbies. But right in the middle of the tirade, he falls asleep right on the microphone. He kind of rests his nose and is face down on top of the microphone gooseneck sort of thing. But then he pops awake immediately and starts acting nice to the cabbies and to Latka. At one time, this was considered just a funny ha-ha thing that he slipped something into Louis' mug, but as you said, this is a felony. I mean, this is awful. I couldn't believe it was being played for laughs.
Oh, come on. You know what? There are tales of the Grateful Dead showing up and dosing an entire water cooler and tripping everyone on the sound crew. And, there's precedent for this sort of thing. It's horrible behavior. And if you're not telling somebody, you're going to, like, Louis De Palma coming down must be a fucking nightmare.
It was shocking, not only because of the reality of the situation, but the fact that it was Reverend Jim doing it, because I'm so used to thinking of him as this benign, compassionate, friendly, affable presence floating through every episode. And to see him actually do this willfully was surprising. but perhaps not shocking, because if he truly was a hippie, this was probably nothing, no big deal to him.
Yeah, to Jim, he's helping Louis expand his consciousness and appreciate what Reverend Jim has to offer as a cabbie. Right now, he's a little too caught up in his own
Yeah,
shit.
so he thought he was doing something good, and eventually Louis sort of devolves into singing a spirited rendition of the song Moonlight Bay, which Jim then joins in with perfect timing, and he harmonizes with Louis, and it's funny and all. And at the end of the whole sequence, the rest of the cabbies even sing the chorus to Louis as a lullaby. Here's another
It's a little much.
here's what I found odd about this whole sequence is, isn't it a little weird that these people who are all in their 30s and 40s during this episode, how is it that they are so familiar with this vaudeville pop song that dates back to 1912? That I didn't get.
Listen, the average viewer probably will never think this way. But now, whenever I hear people break out into song and it's clearly a public domain song, I just assume they're singing a song of the time that everyone knows. So, Moonlight Bay is what they're singing, but it's what, 1980? They'd be singing something from a chorus line, maybe? Or some other contemporary
It
musical?
could be a Beatles song. We don't know.
Because they would all know that. It would have all been on the radio at the time. So I'm just going to go with that.
Yeah, that's fine. But it oddly, it fits in with this whole vaudevillian atmosphere that the Charles brothers have been catering to here.
To the detriment of the episode, it reinforces how vaudeville everything is.
Sure. But then while under the suggestion of this drug, Bobby, before Louis slips off into sleep, Bobby asks Louis if Jim can work there, which he happily agrees to, not before falling asleep on the hood of a cab. And we cut to commercial. Now we cut to a B-roll of a large, imposing government type building. It just looks like it just looks flat and squat and no nonsense. And we cut inside to what I understand is the license registry. It's Jim going to take the test for his hack license. And I'm sure you agree, because we've talked about this many times, but this is another tour de force for the art department. There's walk-up queues for the various license types. There's a full-size machine for doing eye exams, I think.
So what must be happening here at Taxi is they have two sound stages that are permanent, right? Mario's and the cab company, the garage, right? And a third one that they magically transform week to week into fucking amazing sets. Keep going, man. Yeah, the DMV set is beyond the pale. Just like that gymnasium set we mentioned, just like everyone's apartments that we've ever seen. Good God.
There's signs everywhere. There's directions. There's even a table that's just kind of strewn about with pamphlets that everyone has seen at these places, like the different license types. I thought it was great. It looked and felt just like every registry that I've ever been to. So bravo once again.
You know how they have those overnight things for adults at museums. You get to like sleep over at the museum. Yeah. They should do that. They should do that at prop houses, like the Warner Brothers prop house. That would be the greatest thing on earth.
It would, but wouldn't people make off with all the props though?
No, no. I'm saying in a perfect world, HP.
Oh,
Come on, man. Don't ruin it immediately with the worst of us. Some of us just want to take a look at the props. Yeah, I'm gonna run away with a lot of them, but so what?
It would be, but unfortunately, one bad apple spoils the bunch. So what are you gonna do? So the cabbies are there with Jim as he's preparing for his license exam. And this is really the centerpiece of the whole episode for me. This is really the peak of the whole episode. We learned for the first time in the whole series that Jim's last name is Ignatowski, because he's filling out the little form and they ask what his last name is. And there's a funny bit where he gets nervous because he didn't think the questions were going to be this hard. But we find out that he's Jim Ignatowski, which is cool. Jim is struggling, as I said, comically with all these questions because, like, for example, one of the questions is eyes, and Elaine preemptively insists that he not write two as his answer. And then another great question during the the portion is, and the health portion of the exam, it asks mental illness or narcotic addiction, which Jim admits is a tough choice. Vaudeville.
Yeah, man. When they're writing either dumb or burned out, vaudeville jokes are just jokes. They just work. But like when we have our rational, normal people in the characters spouting some of these lines, it just feels so set up punchline, which is how no one talks. I can imagine Reverend Jim actually being this funny.
And I think part of what makes this scene and really almost every interaction with Jim work is the cabbies are collectively the straight man to Jim's comic replies, right? All
of them.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
amazing.
It wouldn't work nearly as well, but that is the format of this scene. They're the straight man, and he gets to have all the funny punchlines to every joke. It totally works. So Bobby helps him finish up the bio portion of the exam, and he says, "All finished. Now you're ready for the test." And Jim is immediately crestfallen because he thought that was the test, and now he's all freaked out. He thinks he's gonna
I'm right there with him. That
he's
was
gonna
enough.
fail. But again, it cannot be overstated how much the studio audience there is responding to each and every one of Jim's antics. Every line, every exasperated look on his face, they're laughing up a storm. It's it's a monumental upgrade from Burns.
Oh my God, yes. Burns didn't get one of these laughs ever in the entire first season. Honestly, like if he got laughs at all, it was because of a line. Christopher Lloyd is getting laughs on looks, just like a look he's giving.
It's just tremendous, and I've said this in the past, but it feels like the chemistry is there, and it really feels like he belongs in the cast. I was saying this back in the Paper Marriage episode because it was so clear, even in season 1, that he was what the show never knew it needed. So anyway, they finally convinced Jim to go ahead and take the exam, and you can see that none of the cabbies think he's actually going to make it. So Elaine walks him over to one of those tiny little school desks that we've all sat in at one time or another. It's a one-piece desk with the flat portion connected to it. And within seconds, Jim is hissing to get Bobby's attention. And here's where he asks the immortal question, which has given Night Mr. Walters its signature grading system.
That's
and
right.
What is it?
That's where it all springs
It all springs
from.
And if you need,
what do the yellow light mean? What do the yellow lights
and
mean?
Bobby whispers back, "Slow down." And in perfect sitcom fashion, Jim repeats the same question, but much slower. What does and Bobby and the rest of the cabbies
They're
getting agitated. You can see they're so frustrated because Jim doesn't get it, right? So then Bobby responds even more frustratedly, "Slow down." And Jim, again, on a loop, he responds even slower this time. What? He's responding so slowly that in the middle of saying it, he has to look back at his paper because he forgets what the rest of the question is.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's great. You don't think it can be funny, repeated as many times as it does. But I got to say, by the fourth time, and as slow as he was going, my girlfriend had not seen the episode, started giggling like crazy about Christopher Lloyd's performance.
It's a marvel. The studio audience is right there with it. Every reaction is getting a bigger and bigger laugh. For me, and I've made mention of this in the past, for me, this is an absolutely classic sitcom sequence. This is up there with the Chuckles Funeral from Mary Tyler Moore or Vitamita Vegemin from I Love Lucy. This should be in the Smithsonian. If it isn't, this sequence is such a masterclass in comedic timing and reactions and all the rest. It's so simple in concept, the sequence, yet so hilarious in execution. And I have to say that so much of the credit has to go to Jeff Conaway. I've already made mention of the fact that he's been put into this role of being the one who really took it upon themselves to try to help Jim. But I'm not sure, and they make mention of this in the Lovey's book. I'm not going to take total credit for this notion, but I'm not sure any other one of those cabbies would have been as appropriate to be the straight man during that sequence. It couldn't be Elaine because she couldn't pull off that frustrated, gritting her teeth, hissing back, slow down. Rieger could have, but it still wouldn't have been.
It wouldn't have been as good.
It would not have been as good. It couldn't be Dan.
Because first of all, it's like you said earlier, the fact that Wheeler is so invested in Reverend Jim Ignatowski is endearing in some way. Like, he tolerates Banta. He likes Reverend Jim. So there's that. And then, the frustration is tempered in a way. Like, you can see he really wants to freak out on him, but also doesn't want to get caught and also doesn't want to hurt Jim's feelings.
I mean, he is rocking his head back and forth, incredulous about the whole sequence. He's just getting more and more just incensed by the ridiculousness of it. It really is wonderful. I also want to throw in, I just mentioned the Frank Lovey's book, Taxi, the Official Fan's Guide, which is an essential resource. I brought it up in the past, but I want to give credit here. Jim Brooks in the book is quoted as saying, "Chris with his driver's test got one of the biggest laughs I ever heard. We just had to bring him back on the show." So really, he came back as a guest star. And if you look at the credits, that's what he is.
This was going to be a second guest star episode?
Yes.
Are they out of their fucking minds?
I mean, if we're taking this quote as...
I thought they saw him in the first episode and said, "Are you available?" And he said, "Nope, not till then." And they said, "Okay, well, as soon as you're available." But you're right, it only makes sense now, because had they cast him for the whole season, then he would have been in those first 2 episodes. I was wondering what the deal was. And again, my mind was, well, he must have been doing something on Broadway or something.
And not only that, but we're going to see he's not in the next episode or 2 after this. So this was kind of his little spot early in season 2, but we'll see. He comes back as a recurring guest star, but then eventually becomes another full-fledged cast member. So I thought that was incredible to read that this sequence really put him on the map as far as being someone they said, yes, this is what we need. Let's bring him back.
Thank God for the Charles brothers.
We fade out at this point back into the garage. And now we see the cabbies are all congratulating Jim. He's passed his exam, fortunately, and he's a driver. Now, for one of the rare occasions in the series, as they're congratulating him, he's not wearing his customary Canadian tuxedo. Did you notice that?
I did. Very unusual.
I would venture to say that his outfit is actually kind of a Rieger outfit, aside from the page boy hat that he has, which is really just a...
Right. Well, it's his first day on the job, You want to dress like a cabbie. And boy, ain't he dressed like a cabbie from the 1940s.
He is. He's got the page boy hat.
He seems like he's a Harvard boy at heart this year.
Yeah, well, we'll see. He has a very interesting backstory that we'll explore. Alex makes a big show of presenting Jim with his first key and his first booking envelope. I mean, they're loving the fact that because I don't think any of them thought he would pass.
I got a good feeling. Remember the last time they did this with that kid Burns?
Oof. Yeah, but I always got the sense with Burns, they just did it more out of obligation. I don't think they felt like he was going to be the sort of compatriot.
Wait a minute. This can't be a guest star episode. He became a cabbie at the end of it. Joined the cast, basically. The whole episode is predicated on him joining the cast.
But then how do you explain that he's still listed as special guest star at the end?
Because he's special.
Well, I won't argue with that, but because I looked. I was during the credits at the beginning, the Salkind zoom credits into the,
Yeah. It does
not say Christopher Lloyd. He's at the end only. Special guest star, Christopher Lloyd. So anyway, Jim, thanks everybody for the help. And Alex insists, Alex is really playing this up. Alex insists that he have the honor of being Jim's first fare. And of course, it has to end with Jim violently throwing the cab in reverse and smashing through the garage wall near the coffee machine. I think he might have even hit the coffee machine.
No, he did not hit the coffee machine, thank God. Coffee machine back in its rightful place now that Xena is no longer around. Now that Now that the candy machine evaporated somehow, I don't even see that around anymore, the particular candy machine that she was loading that time. Anyway, also this wall, have we ever seen this wall before? Because it looks like there's a door there. It's
It
weird.
is very weird, and we should have known something was up because rarely do you have a cab parked in that
Pull
in that
forward.
orientation. Again, this is Chekhov's cab now. You don't put a cab there in that setup and not expect some hijinks to ensue.
I love it that the taxi people have accelerated the Chekhov's gun
I guess.
formula. It's like show the audience, then use the
Yeah,
item.
I can't
immediately.
stop seeing it now. I see it in every episode because it's so apparent. So anyway, that's the end of the episode. And like I said, we see Christopher Lloyd credited as special guest star at the end credits. And and there we go. Now is the point in the episode now is the point in the podcast where we discuss
Now is the time on Sprockets
when we dance. We're going to talk about the aforementioned yellow lights.
What does a yellow light mean?
And there's Reverend Jim again. So just to refresh everybody's memory, we grade on a scale of 5 yellow lights. 1 yellow light is the worst taxi episode. 5 yellow lights is the perfect taxi episode. Father Malone, I'm going to start with you as is customary. What do you give Reverend Jim A Space Odyssey?
As a fellow phony baloney man of the cloth, I'm going to give Reverend Jim A Space Odyssey 3 yellow lights.
Are you serious?
Yeah, why? Would you think I was going to give it 4 or 5?
I thought that 3 is just above average.
Listen, pal. Just because Christopher Lloyd is elevating a vaudeville episode does not mean that the vaudeville ain't there.
Look, I can respect your position on this, and I'm not going to argue with you. I will say, for my part, I gave it 5 yellow lights. What do you think about that?
Are you out of your mind? You gave it a fucking perfect score?
They do not get more rewatchable.
A perfect
Listen
score.
to me. They do not get more rewatchable than this episode. Tell me if this comes on, you're not glued to the television for 28 minutes.
Sure, there are other episodes that I would be more apt to watch than this from the first season.
I disagree. And look, not only is this episode
Angela, that's a good one.
I
You
didn't
love
give
that
it-
one? Let's watch that one.
Listen, not only does this episode introduce an iconic character, it is
Sure. No, it doesn't introduce it. Sorry, that was first season as
Okay.
well. Go ahead, continue.
Let me rephrase that. Not only does this episode reintroduce an iconic character, but it's filled with wall-to-wall jokes and humor. And
Oh, they are wall to wall, those jokes, aren't they? They're everywhere.
it's so funny.
Those jokes right from the stage of 1926.
Ziegfeld Follies.
Herbert and Shlomo, everybody. Na, 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 na.
Look at us.
What can somebody do who can do nothing? Cab driver. Get the hook.
Listen. Not only, here's the thing. As a sign of positives to come, all of the cabbies are present and participating in the events of this episode. We're always complaining that, this episode was okay, but I didn't have enough cabbie interaction, or I was missing Bobby, or I was missing this. We have it's a full house. Everybody's featured.
HP, we have a saying in my country. That means poor guy. One less yellow light based on that joke alone.
All right. Well, anyway,
You cannot have recycled Latka material and give it a perfect score.
I'm grading this not just on the humor and all that, but this is
You're basing it on its place in the history
yes,
of taxi.
this episode has such a hallowed place in taxi history that
I guess I just want to be a little honest with our listeners is all.
apparently,
Okay, continue.
But finally, my final point, if I may, is that this contains a signature laugh out loud classic line or bit in What Does a Yellow Light Mean? Of course it's going to be a 5 yellow light episode. What are you, nuts? This is the quintessential funny taxi episode. 5 yellow lights. Done. There you go. So to recap, I give it 5. Father Malone chooses to give it 3 for reasons
Correct.
known only to himself. But
No, it's not only myself. I think I've explained myself. I think that the tidal wave of vaudeville that the cast had to strive mightily against, and they managed to do so. That's admirable. Nevertheless, it shouldn't have been there.
that's fair. It's, you know what? It's fine. You say tomato, I say tomato.
You know what? Yeah, okay, you know what? The episode hasn't ended. I will increase it to 4 yellow lights, but not for the reasons you're thinking.
Why, pray tell?
Because the opening ended up being an inadvertent prototype for Cheers.
That is also a good point. It didn't factor into my grading, but that's fair.
Yeah, but your grading is based on false pretenses.
Yeah, but ultimately we're not worlds apart.
You're basing it based on that you like that line of the show, that you remembered like giggling about that when you were a kid. Sure, okay, great. And then you obviously are seeing that this is a monumental episode and that it is finally when Reverend Jim joins the cast. I respect both of those things. Nevertheless, there's flaws in this script.
We
buddy.
always say one of the hallmarks of a highly regarded episode is its rewatchability. To me, that they don't get any more rewatchable than this. I'm watching this thing if it comes on. I'm glued to the TV for the ensuing half hour. So, you know.
Yeah, but you know what? If an episode of Knight Rider came on, I'd probably watch that too. So it doesn't make it a perfect episode.
No,
of
you're
television.
probably right. But I'm sticking to it. I'm sticking to my grade, my 5 yellow lights. And look, we're not worlds away. 1 yellow light between us. That's not bad.
I think there's a gulf between us now, but
All right. Well, that'll do it for this episode of Night, Mr. Walters. Father Malone, where can the fine folks find you when you're not clocked into the garage?
go over to Weirding Way Media. It's where you're preparing this show. It's that's where I am. You can hear my show Dark Destinations. It's a radio drama that I write and produce. Or you can hear Midnight Viewing, the horror anthology podcast, which I co-host with the Projection Booth's Mike White and the Culturecast Chris Stash. We look at horror anthology television series with some bonus episodes where we talk to creators and writers and other podcasters. Check that show out. I'm real proud of it.
As you should be. And I always say this, but I mean it. Please check out Dark Destinations. It's something that I have been tangentially involved in, but despite that,
Tangentially, he writes all the music. He performs in it. So I'm not extra plugging my show right now. I'm just saying, like, don't discount your
sure.
role.
But even if I wasn't involved, it's such a well-written and well-produced show. If you like audio drama, good storytelling, check it out. You won't be disappointed. For myself, you can also find me on the Weirding Way Network. I also have done a podcast with Father Malone and Mondo Heather's Heather Drain called Noise Junkies. If you are a music nerd like we are, I encourage you to check that out. Also, I have a Bandcamp site called hpmusicplace.bandcamp.com. Look for some new material coming there in the not too distant future. So that'll do it. Thank you so much for listening. Please feel free to subscribe to this podcast, write a review, or rate us. We'd love to hear from you in any manner that you choose. So for myself and for Father Malone, thank you again for listening, and we'll see you all next time.
Night, Mr. Walters.